time this slide goes up, I look at it and I say, productivity hacks for the cereal. And I think to myself, not a lot good comes after the word cereal. In my case, it happens to be serial entrepreneur. And I'm so thankful that I'm able to be here with you tonight. So I thought I'd tell you a little bit about my background. And I'm going to do it by way of numbers. So we'll start with the number 5. I have run and started 5 different companies. I currently have 3. And these businesses range from tourism to IT to call centers to the mortgage industry to tourism. So it's been quite a large spread that I've done those on. And I think that's what kind of gives me that background where people call me a serial entrepreneur. And Sheridan was so kind that she actually talked a little bit about the fact that I started my first business when I was 14 years old. But a question that I often get asked is, how did you know that you wanted to be an entrepreneur? And that happened when I was 6 years old. So imagine this. I grew up very poor. My dad was an immigrant from India, came to America with $2 in his pocket, and got involved in the hotel industry, buying these sort of, we call them roadside motels and fixing them up. And so we were very, very poor, and we actually lived in a hotel for a lot of our life in the early years. Well, we got our first house when I was 6 years old, and we were starting to get a little bit of money, and my mom took me to the store, and she bought me a bottle of Tea Rose perfume. And I was so excited, because this was a sign of maturity. Like, I had my own perfume. So I sprayed it on myself and went home, and this happened to be the day that my cousins came over. And so I'm so proud. I'm like, I called them bro. I'm like, bro, look at my Tea Rose perfume. And they were like, oh my gosh, and they grabbed it from me. And I was like, oh my goodness. 10 minutes later, they returned with an empty bottle. They had sprayed it all throughout our house. I went to my room, heartbroken, sobbing, like my first sign of maturity. My perfume had just been like completely used up. And my cousin, my brother, he walked over to me and he's like, don't worry, Vicki, I'm sure you'll think of something. And it was in that moment like a light bulb went off. And I said, you're right, I'm going to. I said, you're the oldest. You go to the kitchen and fill a pot with water and start boiling it. I enlisted my younger cousin and I said, outside. And him and I started picking off all of my mom's prized rose petals from her roses. And I went inside to the kitchen and I put those rose petals into the water, and 30 minutes later, I had successfully refilled my Tea Rose perfume. Now I finished filling my bottle and I looked over and the pot still was halfway full. And again, I was like, if I was willing to pay for my Tea Rose perfume, I'll bet you other people will. I washed out my baby sister's Gerber jars, the glass Gerber jars, started filling it with my Tea Rose perfume, and proceeded to spend the afternoon hawking it around the neighborhood. I came home $6 richer and guaranteed that I knew I was going to be an entrepreneur. So that bracelet, that Tea Rose perfume situation morphed into selling custom bracelets when I was in grade school. I got upgraded to making handmade pot holders because someone gave me like a little weaving loom. And then it was arbitraging donuts across campus instead of having kids go to the cafeteria. And it just continued from there. But I started my first real business when I was 14 years old, and I moved from Georgia, the state, not the country, to Arizona. And my dad had moved us there because at this point, he was doing hotels, and he was getting to the point where he had enough wealth accumulated, he could build his own properties. So he said, Sedona is where it's going to be at. I'm going to be able to build my hotels. And I thought, there's not really a market for perfume, bracelets, pot holders, donuts, or custom CDs. What am I going to do in Sedona? And I said, it's a tourism place. So I started my first company called Sedona Reservations. I'm going to age myself a little bit. At this time, I would call the Arizona Republic and place an ad in the classified section every Sunday for, call me, I'll book your reservations for you. I'll book your entire Sedona vacation. So I created this sophisticated set of Word documents and cutting-edge Excel spreadsheets. This was back in the late 90s. And I put together a platform by which people could call me, and I would check my voicemails after school and call people people back and book their entire vacation from beginning to end. So it was really a revolutionary idea back in those days. So the company grew, and actually I had quite a clientele, and I sold that company when I was 17 years old and I went off to college. And I thought, you know, I'm gonna be a normal kid. I'm gonna be a normal college student. So that gives you the background about my companies. I actually have four children. My current businesses that I shared with you, we have Envision IT, Valor Global Call Centers, and the TouchPoint solution, which invented these wearable devices that take away stress. They all span right now 3 continents and 3,000 employees. I am made up of 2 cultures. I share with you that background story. My mom and dad both immigrated from India, but they raised an American girl. If I had like a soundbite, I'd play that American Woman song right now. And it's interesting. I'm the first generation here, and it's really the merging of 2 different cultures. And I will say I only have one husband. So, back for a second. Oh no, how do I go backwards?
Oh, the other button.
Just kidding. Okay. So I went to college, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to have a really normal college, right? I'm going to do my share of learning, my share of partying, and college was going along really well. I had a great first semester, super fun. My second semester, I got into my car, and what I thought was going to be a routine drive home from the library all the way back to my dorm. I woke up some period of time later in a ditch on the side of the road in my car. What had happened is that I had my first ever heart episode. You see, I have a heart condition that went diagnosed all the way until I was 18 years old. And that was my first heart episode that happened while I was driving. That incident kicked off an entire year of testing, research, and ultimately a heart surgery, which was unsuccessful. The doctor said, we don't know what your life is going to be like now. And we suggest that you move home and stay close to your family. And in that moment, mortality became very real. Someone had given me a book. Many of you may have read it. It's called The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. And I was reading it, this quote popped up. And it said, one day you will wake up and there will not be any more time to do the things you've always wanted to do. So do it now. And those words rung in my ears. Do it now. Time became such a precious commodity to me because I didn't know, and I still don't know. How much time do I have left? And that question is not an isolated one for me alone. It's actually one that every one of you has to grapple with every day, whether you realize it or not. So I came home, and I very quickly had an opportunity to do it now. The day that I graduated from college, I am a lumberjack. If any of you lumberjacks out there, yay! It's the most politically correct school you can go to in the state. So, graduated from NAU, lumberjack. But the day that I graduated, I ended up walking into an apartment where I found 2 teenage boys. They had been abandoned by their parents. Their parents were from India. They had been deported and decided to make the decision to not tell immigration that they had boys here. So this 12 and 13-year-old had been going to school every day, coming back home, and working odd jobs to try and make enough money to pay food and rent. And I looked at them and I said, you don't know how much time you have. I don't know how much time I have. But I know one thing's for sure. You should get the right to your childhood. So I picked them up and I said, I'm going to be your mom now. And at 20 years old, I made a huge life-changing decision to become a mom. So that's how I got the first 2 of my 4 kids. And these are my kids. So the 2 big ones, they're now 27 and 28. And those are my 2 children. Now, I had these teenage boys. And I thought to myself, many of you guys probably know a lot about teenage boys, but in my mind I was thinking, oh my God, teenage boys, they're gonna do drugs and have sex, because that's what teenage boys do. So I said, you know, I'm smarter than them. I'm all 20 years old. So this is my plan. I'm going to make them so tired and they don't have time to do drugs or have sex. So I put them in every sport that I could possibly find. I mean, these kids literally did basketball, baseball, soccer. They ended up doing field hockey. And putting them in field hockey was an interesting decision. So back to my background, I'm from two cultures, right? American, but also from India. And the boys are from India. So in India, the biggest sport is cricket. Well, I checked, there's not really a cricket team here in Arizona, surprise. But interestingly, there was a field hockey team, which is the second biggest sport in India. So I said, perfect. I'm gonna sign you guys up for field hockey, and you're gonna go to field hockey, and you're gonna learn how to hang out with all these other Indian kids, and it's gonna be great. So I go to field hockey, and I'm like literally pulling up to the field and like dropping these kids off, and they're like, bye mom, right? And the field hockey coach is like, what the hell? Like, what is going on? I don't understand this. So about 6 months go by, and then he finally corners me, and he goes, I don't understand. Like, why are they calling you mom? This is so weird. I don't like, there's no way you have it. So I explained the story to him, and he's like, all right, I got it. He's like, so do you want to go on a date? I'm like, okay, all right. I was like, all right, we'll go on a date. So 6 months later, he asked me to marry him. And today, it's been 14 years of marriage, we have his other two lovely children. So that is how I have 4 children and 1 husband. So all of this, right, becoming a mom at a really young age, and I was by myself. So something I neglected to mention was that in Indian culture, my parents had this vision for me, which was, we want you to get married. And that was very, very important to them. And when I was 20 years old and I brought home 2 teenage boys, they said to me, who's gonna marry you now? And they were really upset about it. So much so, they actually disowned me. And so I'm 20 years old with 2 teenage boys. I'm not only like legally responsible for 2 kids, I am financially, mentally, and emotionally responsible for them as well. And it started bringing out to me this question about balance, right? It was a lot of responsibility on me as essentially a kid. And I started asking people, and I said, you know, I think it's really important for me to stay healthy, and I gotta be balanced, and I would get these responses back. Well, balance means that you should have a 40-hour work week. You should sleep 8 hours a night and go to the gym every day for an hour. And I was like, I don't think that's gonna work for me. You see, I'm an entrepreneur, and we usually work like 80+ hours a week. It's kind of our normal. You know, it's not gonna work. So I decided to make my own definition of balance. Balance, for me, was having the time to do what I wanted to do. Now, being a little bit, probably noticed I'm a little bit dorky, a little analytical. I was like, let me break this into a math equation. So balance equals time plus knowing what you want to do. So I said, okay, time. I became like obsessed with how do I make more time for myself. So I started, researching and reading books and came across this method called Lean Six Sigma. So it's something they talk about in manufacturing. And it's essentially why they started building like the Ford model car on like an assembly line. It was because it's faster to do one piece and then move it down on the assembly line. And there's also this concept that there is a most efficient way to do something. And everything you do is an activity or a process. And every process is made of either value-added things or waste. And I was like, oh, okay, I kind of understand this. Kind of thinking about it. And then I read the statistic that said 97% of any activity is waste. And I was like, what? Mind blown, mic drop. And I said, well, I'm going to look into this. And so I got to the point where I started looking at it and I said, well, if any process, 97% is waste. If I remove all the waste, I make more time. So being the very scientific method, I was like, let me apply this to making school lunches. So I'm like, all right. And I'm like, how do I make lunches? So I started noticing that I would go to the fridge, I'd pull out a loaf of bread, I'd walk across the kitchen, pull the toaster out of the bottom shelf, and I would toast the bread, then I would wait, and when the bread came out, I'd walk across the kitchen, get a plate, come back over to where the toast was and pull it out, then I would walk back to the fridge, pull out the lunch meat, put it on, and then remember that I forgot the cheese, walk back. You're getting my point. There was a lot of waste in walking, and it was taking me 15 minutes to put together 2 kids' lunches. And I was like, this is silly. What about if I just moved the toaster over here, put the plates next to the toaster, and thought about what I needed out of the fridge every time? I got lunch making done in 5 minutes. I thought, wow, 10 extra minutes, it's not bad. I wonder how I should look at my coffee process. Well, I ended up creating a coffee corner, got the coffee down, then I reorganized my makeup. I mean, I literally went step by step, and I was like, there is truly a most efficient way to do all of these things. The emphasis and the impact of my productivity was so significant. I was literally like keeping track of all the minutes I was gaining back every day. And I thought, but this is easy. This only applies to my personal life, and really like, how much time in the morning do you spend getting ready? So I said, let me apply it at work. And that's when the changes really started happening. So I realized, for myself, the bane of my existence is my email. I must have spent 5 to 6 hours a day combing through emails, and it was all kinds of stuff. And I said, let's apply this whole waste thing to my email. Let's assume a lot of what I get here, I'm not doing it as efficiently as I could. A lot of this email is waste. I started cleaning it up. I invented a system which I coined Lean for email, and I got my email time down to an hour max every day. And I thought, this is really working. So one day, I considered myself done when it was 8 p.m. at night, and I was like, gosh, I have nothing to do right now. I've finished all my daily chores. I think I've accomplished this time piece of that balance equation. So I'm like, great, I'm on my way to creating balance. I got the time part. Now I have to know what I want to do so I can use my time to do what I want to do. So again, I go back and start researching. How do you figure out what you want to do? And everybody started talking about goal setting. And there was all this exciting things about let's make a vision board and have brainstorming sessions. So I did. I got out stack of magazines. Remember, this was 15 years ago when they still had paper magazines. So I got out a whole stack of magazines, and I started cutting out pictures of all the things I wanted. I wanted to travel, and I wanted to have my house look like a spa, how it was so calming, and I wanted to start this new company, and I wanted my kids to look like little Ralph Lauren models. I put it all out on my vision board. And I was so excited. I'm like, this is the best. My life is going to change now. And then 3 months later, my vision board was covered in dust, and I think the kids had tacked up receipts and things over it. And I got, this is not working. What happened? So I stopped and I thought about it. And I remembered the wise words that somebody once gave me. And they said, you can't manage what you don't measure. And I was like, oh, it's like a koan. Let me meditate on that for a couple of days. And I was like, I think I'm understanding. Right. You can't manage what you don't measure. And I had this incident happen with my husband, and this is what really was a tipping point. So at this point, I'm married about 3 years, maybe 4 years. And I'm having this argument, like we all do with our respective others. And I'm like, well, you didn't take the trash out. Well, you didn't do the dishes. Well, dinner wasn't ready on time. Well, you didn't braid, our daughter's hair. And on, right? This little argument. And I'm like, you know what? I almost wish you were my employee, because we don't have these arguments with our employees, do we, husband? I call him husband. And he's like, no. And I was like, yeah, that's because our husbands know what we want. And I was like, he said, really? How do they know what we want? I said, because I scorecard them. I clearly set out my expectations. They have KPIs. We meet on a weekly basis, and this is how we do it. And he goes, so should I give you a scorecard? And I was like, yeah, if you want to. And I went to bed. And the next morning, as efficiently as possible, I'm heading to my coffee corner to make my coffee, and there sitting next to my French press is a scorecard. And I was like, I love this man so much, I'm probably going to strangle him. But sure enough, there was a scorecard, and I thought, you know what? Why not give it a gander? Because you can't manage what you don't measure. So my husband and I sat down, and we said, what are all the things that are important to us? And we broke it into categories. Everything from our marriage, to finances, to our family life with our children, to work goals. And my husband, I didn't really emphasize it here, I don't know, I forgot, but he's my business partner. So we run all of our businesses together. We sort of divide and conquer. Sometimes I'll be the CEO of one for a year, and then I'll switch off and go back and forth. Somehow it works. So I said, we'll put all that in there. Let's make a scorecard. And so I'll show you, this is a snippet of our scorecard. And I will tell you that 9 years later, we still scorecard each other. So every December, we sit down and make all of our goals, and then we break them down and say what's really important to us. And then we meet on the 10th of every month. We have a standing date night. super sexy. We sit down with our Google Sheets and fill in the squares. Red, yellow, or green. So, I mean, and things like, for us, we want to make sure we're so busy that we have a lot of family time. So it was important to take the kids on a hike once a month. So we put it down. That was a joint goal. So I put it on there. I wanted to cook twice a week. That was something that was really important to me. I wanted to give that back to the kids. I put it on there. We wanted to sell one of our houses. It didn't sell. And you know, and that ball kind of dropped on my part. Like, I didn't talk to the listing agent, and then I couldn't get the picture scheduled. But we put the emphasis on it, and we got it listed in March, so it moved to yellow, and then eventually it got sold. But with this sort of system, we were now managing what we were measuring. So it came back to that. So I look at it and I say, okay, in order to be productive and have balance in my life, first of all, I needed to be as efficient as possible. Oops. Okay, sorry, we all went away. I needed to be as efficient as possible. I'm going to go back to my slide. So I had to have the time, and then I needed to know, what is it that I wanted to do? And this combination of looking at everything that we do and saying, what is wasteful and what can I strip out of that process or activity? And then saying, what do I want to do with now this time that I've freed up? And not just what do I want to do with it? How do I break it into bite-sized, actionable steps that I can actually implement and do? So that brought us to our scorecarding. Now, in my quest to want to be as efficient as possible, it actually led me through my research to what we're doing now, which is we created a neuroscience hack. Unfortunately, the fight or flight mechanism, which is built into our brains, was built in millions of years ago. And we don't need it the way that we needed it when we were running from saber-toothed tigers. So we invented a technology that actually alters your stress response, it improves your sleep, and encourages logical thinking. So for me personally, what do I want to do? What am I freeing up time from my other two companies to do? Is to build this company. Because I believe so strongly that I want everyone to have that opportunity to have a lower stress response and enjoy your life and have time to do the things that you want to do in your quest for balance. So before I go, I wanted to just share with you some of the books that I have highlighted over the years. If you haven't read The Alchemist, it's a fabulous, easy read. Scaling Up and the 4 Disciplines of Execution highlight some of the management system that we've implemented throughout all of our companies. And if you want more details on how we've scorecarded and how we've done that in our family, we actually have a post up on the TouchPoints blog where we talk about it in detail. So thank you again so much for the privilege and honor of being able to talk with you tonight.
Thank you so much, Vicki. That was amazing. And I actually am going to implement that